Dr. Jaiho Park stared at his computer screen, his coffee growing cold beside him. The signal patterns made no sense, yet they kept coming in perfect intervals. 3 days now, he had watched these strange waves appear on his monitors at the Korean Space Research Institute. "Dr. Park, you need to see this." Han Sol burst into the lab, waving a tablet in his hand. The young research assistant's normally neat hair was messy, as if he had been running his hands through it for hours. Jaiho looked up from his screen. "What did you find?" "I was looking through old records like you asked," Han Sol said, catching his breath. "The signal pattern. It matches something we've seen before. Many times before." He placed the tablet on Jaiho's desk, his hands shaking with excitement. The screen showed a series of dates, each one marking a reported Slender Man sighting somewhere in the world. Beside each date was an astronomical reading, strange signals that observatories had dismissed as background noise. "This can't be right," Jaiho muttered, scrolling through the data. But there it was, the same pattern, repeated over and over across decades. Every time someone had reported seeing a tall, thin figure in the darkness, these signals had appeared in the sky. Jaiho pushed back from his desk and walked to the window. The Seoul skyline sparkled in the evening light, millions of people going about their lives, unaware that something impossible was happening in this small lab. "There's more," Han Sol said quietly. He tapped the tablet, bringing up a new screen. "I found references to similar sightings in ancient Korean texts, old stories about watchers in the night, tall beings that stood in the forests. The descriptions match perfectly." Jaiho felt a chill run down his spine. "How far back do these records go?" "The oldest I found was from 1392, but there are probably more." A beeping sound from Jaiho's computer made them both jump. The signal was changing. The regular pattern they had been tracking for days was shifting into something new. "It's different," Han Sol said, leaning over Jaiho's shoulder as they watched the waves transform on the screen. "Not different," Jaiho corrected him, his voice barely a whisper. "It's becoming clearer, like something adjusting its frequency until we can understand it." The waves settled into a new pattern. Numbers began appearing on the screen. Simple mathematical sequences at first, then more complex equations. Jaiho's hands flew over the keyboard as he tried to keep up with the incoming data. "It's not just signals," he said, his eyes wide. "It's a message. Someone or something is trying to talk to us." Han Sol grabbed a nearby chair and sat down heavily. "What do we do?" Jaiho thought for a moment, then reached for his phone. "We call Suji." Captain Sujai Kim answered on the third ring. "Do you know what time it is, Jiho?" "The Hawking Deep Space Array," Jaiho said without preamble. "Is it operational?" There was a pause on the other end. "You know I can't discuss that." "Suji, I need it. We're receiving something impossible. I need the array to get a clear transmission." Another long pause. "Give me an hour. Don't do anything until I call back." Jaiho put down the phone and looked at Han Sol. "Start downloading everything. Every bit of data we've collected, every old record you found. We need it already." As Han Sol worked, Jaiho stared at the numbers still flowing across his screen. Each sequence seemed to tell part of a story that had been playing out for centuries. The true story behind every dark shape people had seen watching them from the shadows, every tall figure glimpsed at the edge of the woods. His phone rang exactly 1 hour later. "The array is yours for the next 6 hours, Suji said. "Whatever you found, Jaiho, it better be worth calling in every favor I had." Jaiho looked at the screen, where the mathematical sequences had begun forming into something that looked almost like DNA structures, but unlike anything he had ever seen before. "Trust me, Suji," he said. "After tonight, everything changes." As if in response, the signals pulsed brighter, casting strange shadows on the lab walls. Somewhere in the darkness beyond Earth, Something that had waited centuries was finally ready to be known. 3 weeks after the signal discovery, Captain Sujai Kim stood on the bridge of the research vessel Morning Calm, staring at the strange object floating in the darkness of space. They had traveled to the edge of the solar system, following the mysterious signals that grew stronger with each passing day. "Time to intercept. 10 minutes," announced the ship's navigator. Suji turned to look at the young engineer, Ta-1, who hadn't spoken a word since they first spotted the object. His face was pale, and his hands gripped the edge of his console too tightly. "Something wrong?" she asked. Ta-1 swallowed hard. "Captain, I've seen that shape before. In my dreams when I was a child. My grandmother used to say I had visits from the Nightwalker." Sujai looked back at the object. It was long and dark, shaped like a coffin but much larger. Its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her communication screen lit up with an incoming call from Earth. Dr. Jaiho Park's tired face appeared. "Have you gotten closer readings?" he asked without greeting. "It's giving off the same signals we detected from Earth, but stronger now," Suji replied. "And Jaiho, it's big. At least 30 meters long. Any signs of life?" "Nothing clear yet." But Suji paused, unsure how to describe what she was seeing. "The surface keeps changing, like it's breathing." The object grew larger in their view screen as they approached. Its black surface rippled slightly, like dark water in a gentle breeze. "Launch the probe," Suji ordered. They watched as the small probe moved toward the object. As it got closer, its cameras revealed more details. The surface wasn't solid metal or rock, but something in between, with patterns that looked almost like circuit boards mixed with organic tissue. Suddenly, the probe's lights hit something that looked like a window or viewport. Inside, they could see something that made everyone on the bridge gasp. A face, or at least something like a face. It was pale white and impossibly long, with features that seemed to shift and change as they watched. The being inside appeared to be sleeping. "Are you seeing this?" Suji asked Earth. "Recording everything," Jaiho confirmed, his voice shaking slightly. "It matches the descriptions. Every single one, from every culture. The tall, thin figure, the face that's hard to look at directly." Ta-1 made a small sound. "The Nightwalker," he whispered. The probe's instruments began sending back data. "It's in some kind of suspended animation," Sujai reported, reading the numbers. "The material of the ship or pod, whatever it is, it's maintaining a stable environment inside." "Can you bring it aboard?" Jaiho asked. Sujai looked at her crew. They were scared, but she could see curiosity winning over fear in their eyes. "The cargo bay is large enough. We have containment fields." "Do it," Jaiho said. "But Suji, be careful. We've been looking for proof of alien life for so long. Now it seems alien life was looking for us first." It took them 2 hours to carefully maneuver the object into the ship's cargo bay. The whole time, Suju couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, even though scans showed the being inside was still dormant. As they secured the last locks, Ta-1 approached her. "Captain, in my dreams, the Nightwalker was never scary. It just watched, like it was waiting for something." Suji put a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe it was waiting for this moment, for us to be ready to find it." The ship's lights flickered briefly, and for a second, Suji thought she saw a tall, thin shadow on the wall. But when she looked again, it was gone. In the cargo bay below, the black surface of the object rippled once, like something slowly waking up. The secure facility on Luna Base hummed with activity. Dr. Du Yun watched through triple-reinforced glass as the black object from space sat in the center of the containment chamber. It had been 3 days since the Morning Calm delivered its strange cargo, and now everyone waited. "Vital signs are changing," said one of the technicians. "Whatever's in there, it's waking up." Du Yun pressed the comm button. "All non-essential personnel, clear the chamber." Security teams, stand by. The surface of the object began to move more actively now, its black surface flowing like liquid metal. A seam appeared down its center, spreading slowly like a flower opening in the morning sun. Atmospheric readings are stable, reported another technician. No sign of harmful substances. The scene widened, and something began to emerge. First came a hand, pale white and impossibly long-fingered. Then an arm that seemed to stretch forever. The being unfolded itself from the pod with movements that didn't quite look natural, like a piece of paper unfolding itself. When it stood at its full height, it nearly touched the chamber's 5-meter ceiling. Its body was thin as a shadow, wearing what looked like a black suit that merged with its skin. Its face, Du-Yun had to force himself to look at it directly. The features seemed to shift and change, never quite settling into anything human. "This is Dr. Du-Yun of the Luna Base Research Facility," he said into the microphone, trying to keep his voice steady. "Can you understand me?" The being's head turned toward him with liquid smoothness. Then, to everyone's surprise, it raised one long hand in what appeared to be a wave. A voice filled the room, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. It spoke in perfect Korean, but with an accent that made the words sound like they were being pulled from a great distance. "We have been waiting a very long time for this moment," it said. Du-Yun's hands shook as he wrote notes. "You speak our language. We speak all human languages. We have watched. We have learned. We have waited." "What are you?" Du-Yun asked. "Your people have given us many names through the centuries," the being said. "The Watchers, the Tall Ones, the Night Walkers, most recently, Slender Man. We let you see what your minds could accept." Through the glass, Du-Yun noticed something odd. The being cast no reflection. "Are you really here? Physically? We exist in many ways at once. This form is only one of them. It is the one we found causes the least distress to human minds." A small alarm sounded. One of the sensors was picking up unusual energy readings. The being turned its head toward the source of the sound, and the alarm immediately stopped. "You don't need these barriers," it said, gesturing to the containment field. "If we meant harm, we would have acted long ago." "Then why reveal yourself now?" Du-Yun asked. "Because you are ready, almost ready, and because there is danger coming. We have protected developing species across the galaxy for millions of years. Earth is one of many worlds under our watch." Du-Yun thought about all the stories, all the sightings through history. The legends about you taking children. Misconceptions. We watch, we protect. When necessary, we warn. But we never interfere directly, until now. Suddenly, all the screens in the control room lit up with strange symbols. Du-Yun recognized them from the original signals they had received. "This is our true language," the being said. "Learn it. You will need it soon." "Why?" Du-Yun asked, but he felt he already knew the answer. Something in the being's manner had changed, becoming more urgent. "Because the barriers between realities are growing thin," it said, "and what lies beyond them remembers Earth. We cannot hold them back alone anymore." The lights in the facility flickered, and for a moment, Du-Yun saw not one being in the chamber, but countless shadows stretching in every direction, like branches of an infinite tree. When the light steadied, the being stood normally again, waiting patiently as the humans tried to understand what they had just seen. Dr. Yunji sat across from the being in the newly designed interview room. After a week of meetings, they had removed the barriers and created a more comfortable space. The room was large enough to accommodate the entity's height, with simple furniture and soft lighting. "Tell me about your world," Yunji said, holding her tablet ready. She had conducted 15 interviews already, but each one revealed new surprises. The being, which had asked to be called Observer, folded its impossibly long fingers together. "Our world exists in what you would call a different dimension. We evolved beyond physical form long ago. Then why appear to us as the Slender Man? Our natural form would harm human minds. We learned this early in our observations. The shape you see is a compromise, the closest we could come to a form your minds could accept. Eunji thought about this, but why appear scary? We did not intend to frighten, Observer said, its voice carrying a note of what sounded like regret. Our cloaking technology interacts strangely with human perception. Your minds filled in the gaps with your fears. We appeared tall and thin because that is how our energy signature manifests in your dimension. The dark suit, the shifting face, all are side effects of our attempt to stay hidden. A soft chime sounded, and Eunji checked her tablet. New data had arrived from the research team studying Observer's pod. Your ship, she said, it's not just a ship, is it? No, it is a bridge between dimensions, a way for us to maintain physical form in your world. Observer stood and walked to the window, looking out at the lunar landscape. There are many such bridges across your planet. Your people built stories around them. Fairy rings, cursed grounds, places where people disappear. Were you really protecting us? All this time? Observer turned back to face her. Its features seemed clearer now, as if it was making an effort to appear more stable. Yes. Your world draws attention from beings that would do harm. We are part of a network of guardians, watching over developing species across many dimensions. Eunji pulled up an old image on her tablet, a cave painting from France, showing tall figures watching over a human settlement. How many of you are there? We are countless, yet few. Time works differently for us. One observer can exist at many points in time and space. The one you see before you has watched Earth for what you would call 10,000 years. A movement caught Eunji's eye. In the corner of the room, shadows seemed to dance and stretch. Observer noticed her attention. Ah, it said, you are beginning to see more clearly. As humans spend time with us, their minds adapt. They begin to perceive more of our true nature. The shadows formed patterns that looked like writing. Eunji realized she could almost understand them. The stories about you taking children, she said slowly. They weren't true, were they? We never took anyone, but we did protect them. Sometimes, when great danger threatened, we would appear to children. They could see us more easily than adults. We would warn them, guide them away from harm. Eunji thought of her own childhood, of a night when she had gotten lost in the mountains. She remembered following a tall figure that seemed to glow softly in the darkness. It had led her back to her parents. I saw you once, she whispered. Yes, Observer said. You were one of many we guided. Your mind was open, accepting. You saw us as we wished to be seen. Protectors, not monsters. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the base. Eunji's tablet filled with urgent messages. What's happening? She asked. Observer's form became more rigid. They have found you, the ones we have been holding back. Someone has opened a door that should have stayed closed. Who? Dr. Hyunwoo and his team. They are trying to replicate our technology, but they do not understand the dangers. Observer's voice became urgent. Call Dr. Park. Tell him to shut down all dimensional research immediately. If that door opens fully, everything we have protected will be at risk. The shadows in the room grew darker, forming shapes that made Eunji's eyes hurt. Through the window, she saw strange lights appearing in the lunar sky, like tears in the fabric of space itself. Red warning lights flashed through the corridors of Luna Base as Dr. Jaeho Park ran toward the restricted research wing. Dr. Hyunwoo's team had gone too far, trying to copy the Watcher's technology without understanding it. How bad is it? Jaeho asked as he reached the security checkpoint. Captain Soo-jae Kim was already there, wearing a protective suit. Very bad, she said, pointing at the monitors. Look. The screen showed Hyunwoo's lab. Strange black tears floated in the air like rips in a piece of paper. Through them, Jaeho could see something. Shapes that didn't make sense, colors that shouldn't exist. Where's Hyunwoo? Jaiho asked. Gone, Suji said quietly. He and 3 others disappeared when the first tear opened. The rest of his team got out. Observer appeared beside them, moving without a sound. Its tall form seemed more solid now, more present than before. The barrier between dimensions is breaking, it said. They tried to create a portal using pieces of my ship, but they did not understand the safeguards, the balances needed. On the screens, they watched as the tiers grew larger. Dark shapes moved behind them, pressing against the thin wall between worlds. What's on the other side? Suji asked. Things that remember Earth, Observer said. Ancient beings that we drove away long ago. They have been waiting for a way back. Jaiho studied the readings from the lab's sensors. The tiers are spreading. If they reach a certain size, they will join together, Observer finished, creating a permanent gateway. Everything we have protected you from will return. How do we stop it? Observer's form flickered, showing glimpses of its true nature, a complex pattern of light and shadow that hurt Jaiho's eyes. The tiers can be sealed, it said, but it requires both Watcher technology and human consciousness, a bridge between our 2 forms of existence. What do you mean? Suji asked. A human must join with our technology, become something new, someone who can touch both realities at once. That would kill them, Jaiho said. No, Observer replied. But they would change, become like us, in some ways, neither fully human nor fully Watcher. A crash came from the lab. One of the tiers had grown large enough to touch a desk, which vanished instantly. In its place, something began to form, a shape made of angles that shouldn't exist. How long do we have? Suji asked. Hours, perhaps, Observer said. No more. Jaiho turned to look at the being. Why didn't you stop this earlier? You knew what Hyunwoo was doing. We cannot interfere directly. It is our highest law. We can warn, we can guide, but we cannot act without a human choosing to help us. Another crash from the lab. More tears appearing. Through them, Jaiho heard sounds that made his chest hurt, like music played on instruments made of screams. If someone volunteered, Suji said slowly, what would happen to them? Suji, no. Jaiho grabbed her arm. You can't. They would gain abilities beyond human understanding, Observer said, but they would lose parts of their humanity. The change would be permanent. Before anyone could respond, new alarms started blaring. The tears were spreading faster now. On the monitors, they watched as parts of the lab began to change, transforming into something alien and wrong. We need to decide now, Observer said. Once the tears reach a certain size, even our combined power cannot close them. Jaiho looked at the screens, then at Suji, then at the strange being that had watched over humanity for so long. In the lab beyond, reality itself was coming apart, and somewhere in the darkness between dimensions, ancient horrors were waking up. They needed a volunteer, someone to become something new, someone to save everything. I'll do it. The voice came from behind them. Everyone turned to see Jinho, one of the younger researchers, standing in the doorway. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. Jinho, you don't have to, Dr. Park said. We can find another way. No time, Jinho replied. He walked forward, looking up at Observer. I've been studying the Watcher's language patterns. I understand more than anyone else here. It should be me. Observer turned its featureless face toward Jinho. You understand what this means. You will never be fully human again. I know. Jinho looked through the window at the spreading tears in reality. Something dark moved behind them, like a giant hand pressing against thin ice. But if we don't act now, there won't be any humans left at all. Suji stepped forward. Let me do it instead. I'm the captain, it's my responsibility. No, Jinho said firmly. You're needed to coordinate the defense if this doesn't work. And He paused. I've always felt different. Like I was waiting for something. Maybe this is it. Observer raised one long hand. We must act quickly. The barriers grow weaker with each moment. They rushed to prepare. The base's medical team set up emergency equipment while engineers brought pieces of Observer's ship, the strange black material that seemed to flow like liquid metal. How does this work? Jin-Ho asked as they helped him onto a special table. The technology will bond with you, Observer explained. Your consciousness will expand. You will see as we see, exist as we exist. The black material began to move on its own, flowing toward Jin-Ho like water running uphill. Dr. Park watched the monitors carefully. Heart rate rising, he reported. Brain activity off the charts. Jin-Ho gasped as the first tendril of black material touched his hand. It spread up his arm like flowing ink, but instead of covering his skin, it seemed to sink into it. Cold, he whispered. So cold. Your mind is opening, Observer said. Do not fight it. Let the changes happen. Jin-Ho's body began to change. He grew taller, his limbs lengthening impossibly. His skin became pale, almost white. But his eyes changed the most. They grew larger, darker, until they looked like windows into space itself. I can see, Jin-Ho said, but his voice had changed. It echoed strangely, as if coming from many places at once. I can see everything. He sat up, his movements smooth and strange. When he stood, he was as tall as Observer. His form seemed to shift and change, like a shadow in moving water. The transformation is complete, Observer said. How do you feel? I feel. Jin-Ho looked at his hands, which could now stretch and move in impossible ways. I understand now. I can see all the layers of reality at once. A loud crash from the lab interrupted them. One of the tiers had grown large enough to swallow a whole wall. Through it, they could see vast shapes moving in the darkness. They're coming, Jin-Ho said. His new voice carried both fear and determination. I can feel them pushing against the barriers. Can you stop them? Suji asked. Jin-Ho moved toward the lab, his form flickering between human and something else. I can try. I can see the tears now. Really see them. They're like wounds in space itself. You won't be alone, Observer said. We will help you. Jin-Ho turned to look at his friends one last time. His face was still recognizable, but it seemed to shift and change, showing glimpses of something vast and strange beneath. Don't worry, he said, managing a smile that was almost human. I'm still me. Just more than me now. Together, Jin-Ho and Observer moved toward the lab where reality was breaking apart. The fate of Earth, and perhaps all of humanity, now rested on the shoulders of a young man who had chosen to become something more than human to save everyone he loved. Emma and Jack walked down the quiet street. The sun was almost gone behind the tall buildings. Long shadows stretched across the sidewalk. What should we do now? Emma asked, looking at Jack. Jack thought for a moment. Let's go to the park, he said. We can sit on the grass and watch the stars come out. Emma smiled. That sounds nice. They turned the corner and headed towards the park. As they walked, Emma reached out and took Jack's hand. He smiled at her and squeezed her hand gently. When they reached the park, they found a spot on the soft grass. They lay down on their backs and looked up at the darkening sky. One by one, tiny stars began to twinkle overhead. For a while, they just lay there in silence. The only sounds were the chirping of crickets and the distant noise of the city. Finally, Emma turned her head to look at Jack. It's so peaceful here, she whispered. I'm glad we came. Jack rolled onto his side to face her. In the dim light, Emma could just make out his smile. Me too, he said softly. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Emma's skin tingled at his touch. Slowly, Jack leaned in closer. Emma's heart raced as his lips met hers. The kiss was soft and sweet. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Jack took Emma's hand again, as they looked back up at the stars. "Look, a shooting star." Emma pointed towards a streak of light that flashed across the sky. "Quick, make a wish," Jack said. Emma closed her eyes for a moment. Then she opened them and looked at Jack. "I think my wish already came true," she said. Jack pulled her close and kissed her again under the canopy of glittering stars. Everything felt right in that perfect moment, just the two of them together in the peaceful night. 347 words. The next morning, Emma woke up with a big smile on her face. She couldn't stop thinking about the magical night she had spent with Jack under the stars. It had been the perfect end to a wonderful day. She got dressed and went to the kitchen. Her mom was there, making breakfast. "Good morning," her mom said when she saw Emma. "You look happy today." Emma smiled. "I am happy," she said. "Yesterday was a really good day." Her mom smiled back. "I'm glad to hear that. What did you do?" Emma told her about spending time with Jack. She told her about going to the park and seeing the shooting star. It was just so perfect, Emma said with a dreamy look. Her mom put a plate of pancakes in front of Emma. "It sounds like you and Jack are getting quite close," she said. Emma felt herself blush a little. "Yeah, I really like him," she admitted. "He's so sweet and kind. And he makes me laugh." "He sounds like a nice boy," her mom said. She sat down across from Emma with her own plate of pancakes. "Just be careful, okay? Don't rush into anything too fast." "I won't," Emma promised. But inside, her heart was already racing at the thought of seeing Jack again. As if he knew she was thinking about him, Emma's phone beeped with a text message. She looked down and saw it was from Jack. "Good morning, beautiful," the message said. "I can't stop thinking about last night." Emma's face broke into a huge smile. She quickly texted back, "Me neither." It was perfect. She put down her phone and dug into her pancakes, still grinning. She had a feeling today was going to be another great day. 316 words.